Here's one of the latest interviews from Rock and Metal Revival. If you want to hear the whole show, go to rmrshow.com. From the CD Facelift, there's Alice in Chains and Man in the Box on Rock and Metal Revival. And, you know, dude, for a long time, I always blamed grunge for killing metal.
Yeah, but I don't consider Alice in Chains really grunge.
I never have either. And reading their new book, The Story of Alice in Chains, I want to bring on the author of a great new book about Alice in Chains, Mr. David-Desola. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. How's it going?
It's going great. And I just seen Alice in Chains a couple of weeks ago and then got the book and read it. And one of my favorite bands from back in the 90s. How did you get interested in writing a book about Alice in Chains?
Well, about 4 years ago, I was doing my master's at Georgetown, and I was also doing summer school, and I was also working at 60 Minutes. So I had a lot of work on my plate at home. And one night, had a late night reading session, and I just put on the Dirt album for the first time in a very long time. And after I finished listening to it, I thought, there's got to be a book on these guys somewhere. So I went looking for one, didn't find it, and at that point I got the idea of writing it myself.
All right. Well, from stories I've heard about the band, they've been pretty private about their goings-on with the band over the years, the drug habits that eventually took two of their members. Was it easier now that time has passed to get them to talk a little bit more about these topics?
Well, the band wasn't involved with the book, but I mean, people who were in their orbit during various periods, the people who knew them, yes, I think they were. I think, Lane passed away in 2002, so that'd be 13 years ago. Wow. And Mike Starr passed away in 2011, about 6 months before I started working on this. I did 5 or 6 reporting trips to Seattle over the years, and I just touched base with as many people as I could, from people who knew from back in the day, from the local music scene, former bandmates, because they were all previously in other local bands before getting together and forming Alice. I think one thing that did help, I think, had been the passage of, especially with Lane, was the passage of time. I think, if I tried to do this, a year or a couple months after he had died, I think people would have been a little more resistant to talk. But because of that, I think people were a little more willing to open up and talk about who he really was. Mike Starr, he had just passed, obviously, but I found several of his friends and who were willing to talk to me, and they definitely helped shed some light on his life, both before, during, and after Alice in Chains.
So did you have some leftover stories you weren't able to fit in?
Oh, quite a few, actually. It's funny. My big concern when I was starting this was that I was going to come up short on material. And I guess, when you're just starting out and, you've got, 125, 150,000 words to write, you're just like, oh my God, where am I going to get all this stuff? And by the time I was submitting the draft to the publisher, it was exactly the opposite. I had to cut stuff down.
Oh man!
So all the essential stuff is in the book, but the stuff that I cut out were, I had more quotes, either from my own interviews or from other sources, articles, magazines, etc. I also had a lot of documents, police, court records, and things like that, and I cited a lot more of those as well. So I just cut as much as I possibly could. So I mean, there were just there were a few there were some things that I had written longer. There's this this great story of Lane and his friend doing a big wheel races down a freeway off ramp in downtown Seattle. They wiped out and they came home. They're like all bloodied and stretched up, whatever. And so there were a few more quotes, and I think I cut that down from about what would have been like a page long to about 2 paragraphs, basically 1 or 2 paragraphs. So it was a matter of just trimming it down as much as I could, without sacrificing the gist and the substance of what I was trying to tell.
Yeah.
David, I've never really considered Alice in Chains as part of the grunge movement. Do you think the band was lumped into that scene because of geography?
I think geography and timing. I mean, if you look at Facelift came out in August of 1990, and it's interesting because everybody associates grunge with Nevermind, and don't get me wrong, Nevermind was a monster album, but if you look at the timing of things, Alice were the first ones out of the gate in terms of putting out a record. Faithful came out in August of 1990. Pearl Jam's 10 came out in August of 91. Nevermind in September, and Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger in October. So, I mean, you had this whole trifecta, you know, all these things happening very quickly. Those three bands just blew up like boom, boom, boom. And then by that point, Alice, I guess, was wrapping up touring behind Facelift, and they were starting to put together Dirt, and they would record that in the spring of '92. So by the time Dirt comes out, grunge is already huge. So I think what would have happened there is, I think, by combination of geography and timing, I think, and also the fact that they had shot a scene for the movie Singles, if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the labels. You know, I think the labels sort of repackaged them as sort of a grunge band, even though, you know, depending on who you talk to, either, you know, Alice or Soundgarden, probably the most straight up metal of the bunch of that whole era. So, I mean, but yeah, I mean, they're you know, pretty unabashed in their metal roots. I mean, you know, Mike Starr played bass in a local band called Sado, which was named after an Ozzy Osbourne song. I mean, they were heavily influenced by Iron Maiden. They had the sort of twin guitar thing going on at the time. That was pretty big. And Jerry was in a band called Diamond Lie, which Alice in Chains used that name later on, but he had a different band called Diamond Lie in Tacoma, which was, you know, it was, I talked to Jerry's bandmates from that period, and they were, you know, full-on, you know, 80s glam rock, you know, they were into, you know, Poison and Kiss and that kind of stuff, you know, so it was, you know, they were very much a product of their times and their environment, and I think the grunge label gets labeled on them because of, you know, a combination of, I think, sound, I think timing, I think marketing, and, you know, to some extent, I guess the image. I mean, they didn't wear, I don't know if they, you know, there's a couple of shirts of their shots of them wearing flannel and Doc Martens and,
yeah,
you know, they had goatees and stuff. So, I mean, you know, all that stuff I think, kind of got hoisted onto them, but they very much were kind of their own separate animal to begin with. Even if you talk to them today, I think they'll tell you the same thing.
Now, I've seen the band 5 times with this new lineup, but I was only able to see the main lineup once. Now, do you think that hurt or helped the band's popularity with fans that it was so hard to get to see Alice in Chains?
The original? Oh, you were talking about Alice with Lane?
Yeah.
When did you see them?
I saw them early. I saw them on the Kiss farewell tour.
That was '96. Yeah, that was those were Lane's last shows.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
You got to remember that. So I mean, if you look at videos of them, there's, you know, tons of bullets on the internet. You look at videos of them from like the early days, like 90, 91, 92. I mean, they're just this ferocious young live band, and they're putting on a hell of a show every night. But once Lane's Dark album started escalating, it certainly affected the band's overall ability to function. You'll notice that the last year they did a significant touring with Lane was 1993. They did a couple of shows here and there. You remember Unplugged, and then they did the fourth. I think 4 or 5 shows opening for Kiss in the summer of '96, and those were Lane's final public performances. And then, you know, he basically became sort of a recluse until he passed away 6 years later. And, you know, the band regrouped with William in, I think, 2006. So, I mean, that's about a decade of inactivity, at least for them as a unit. I mean, that's a long time for anybody to be out of the game in any profession. You know, whether it's, you know, music or politics or, you know, anything else. So yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I think it's, you know, I think they had to reintroduce themselves in a way as well as introducing the new guy. You know, and that was one of the issues that they had to deal with. I mean, you know, Lane's girlfriend's mother told me that, you know, one thing that he kind of resented was the idea of that he was sort of being singled out as the junkie in the band when, you know, everyone, you know, she told me, you know, all those guys had their issues at the time. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, but I guess him being, you know, kind of so honest in his lyrics, and him being the lead singer kind of automatically gets you more attention. You know, I mean, it's, I don't know, just you know, I think it's just the nature of the beast, I guess. But it's, you know, I do think that long hiatus, that long period of inactivity, that inability to tour, that was a huge detriment to them.
I think you know, you go through their catalog with Lane, and every album has its own persona, and I think that unplugged performance they did for MTV really set them apart from a lot of bands.
Yeah, and I think they were, and I talked to Alex Coletti, who was the producer on a lot of those MTV Unplugged. You know, he did Pearl Jam, he did Nirvana, he did, you know, almost all of them, basically. So, I mean, he's telling me that, you know, of all of those bands, I think they seem to be, you know, almost the most suited for that era. I mean, Nirvana, probably the most famous, obviously, because it's, you know, considered, I guess, their final sort of masterpiece before, at least as an album before Cobain's death. But, Alice, I mean, they had already done 2 acoustic EPs, so they were already sort of dabbling into that territory by the time they accepted that invitation to do that show. So, you know, in a way, it was, you know, it was kind of, they were very well suited for the format.
So are we going to see another rock book from you, or is the next one going to go another direction?
Another direction. I mean, you know, never say never, but you know, there's guys like, you know, Mick Wall and Stephen Davis and so forth who do you know, David Ritz, who do a great job, and they specialize in rock books. I might do one down the road, but for now I'm developing 2 other projects completely different, not music or rock related. But, you know, never say never. If the right, you know, if the right story comes along and then gets my interest, and, you know, I find I have enough, and there's enough there for a book, I'll gladly do it.
So
any suggestions?
Yeah, I think you should make a movie out of this one.
Well, that decision is not not my call. So,
how about the history of cowbell?
The history of cowbell.
Cowbell? Yeah, and rock and roll.
God.
Yeah.
And do you think
you could do? The guy can get an interview with Will Ferrell in character as the guy from Boys for Cold, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Now we know you're an Alice in Chains fan just from hearing you say that you were listening to the Dirt album, and we always let the artist pick a song coming out of here. What's your favorite Alice in Chains song?
Ooh, it's interesting. I mean, I was in middle school when all this stuff happened, so I was just, you know, I heard all these bands from that period, so it's there's a certain element of nostalgia for me, I guess, whenever I hear any of the Nirvana, Pearl Jam, you know, Alice, Soundgarden, and all the other bands from that period, that emerged from that period. So, I mean, I wrote this book as a straight-up biography as much as I could. You know, I'd handle it the same way I would have written a book about, you know, president or prime minister. So, I mean, it wasn't a fan tribute, but, you know, yes, I do enjoy their music, and I can certainly understand and appreciate it a lot more. Having said all that, I think I gravitate more toward a deeper cut.
Okay.
I would go either with Real Thing on Facelift or Right Turn from the Sap EP.
All right. And David, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about your book and where they can pick it up?
Book is available at Barnes & Noble and, you know, at pretty much any major bookstore. I saw it at a bookstore at the terminal at LAX a couple of weeks ago, which was a little surreal. That was a first for me.
Nice.
And you can get on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, you know, any online retailer. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. And here's Alice in Chains on Rock and Metal Revival. To catch the whole show of Rock and Metal Revival, all you have to do is check it out on these affiliates. Mega Rock Radio's on Saturdays from 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and on Uncontrolled Noise Tuesdays at 1 a.m., Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and on Saturday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern on UncontrolledNoise.com. And make sure that you leave them a message and tell them that you found Rock and Metal Revival on their stations. Enjoy this edition of Rock and Metal Revival.